What we're doing tonight is talking as a sort of a continuation from the two special board meetings that we've had in the last month to go over our strategic planning process and the products that have come out of that process. So as you know, Crystal Conley from CEC has joined us to go through the process that we've taken to get to the point that we are at. And I think that's been beneficial to bring the board up to speed on just what's happened in those meetings. But I understand, and it's unfortunate, we haven't had a whole lot of time for board discussion when we look at the products coming out of each of those sessions. So what we're doing tonight is taking a look at each of those products and talking as a leadership team, you know, especially now that we're kind of moving into the final stages of the process. What kinds of things are resonating with you from the work of the team, and what things are feeling like this really should not be something in our final plan. So out of that first meeting, as you might remember, the big product that we surveyed the staff on was our SWOT analysis, and SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We developed the draft SWOT after looking at about 3 hours of data. So Jay, Margaret, Tracy, and I all presented data on finance and tech, student achievement and growth, as well as culture and climate data from students and staff, and our Thrive data. So any sort of, and it was called an environmental scan. We looked at all the data that we collect, the most recent version of it, and each table and each group had a chance to just kind of pour through the data and look at all of the trends that we saw and where they think they belong in each of these boxes. So strengths, again, are things that we are working on and doing well. Weaknesses are things that we're working on and not doing as well as we could be. Opportunities are things that we really haven't started working on but could be beneficial to us if we started working on them. And threats are really the things that we might not have too much control over but would impact how we're doing as a district and how our students are doing. So after that first retreat, we, as you know, surveyed the community, and we got about 333 responses. We talked a little bit about disaggregating that data, those data pieces, which we will do in this next round. But we took those data and adjusted our SWOT, and really, like we talked about, there wasn't too much that changed in terms of moving boxes, but things got more detailed and specific. So we did talk about communication was in a big bucket in the weaknesses area, and after looking at the feedback, it really came back that it was not quite just the whole big bucket of communication, but that there were some pieces of communication that we needed to get better with. So we tried to clarify that based on the feedback. But again, here's the final draft as we have it now. And nothing is really final until we send out that final product to the community for more feedback. So if there's anything on here that we feel like, I guess my two big questions would be, is there anything in these boxes that you feel like are in the wrong place? Or are there any pieces in this that you feel haven't been represented? Is there anything that you feel like should be on the chart that isn't on the chart and hasn't been represented? Mark?
Space allocation constraints is in 2 places.
Yes, that's true.
You enlighten us?
Yes.
It was
So,
enrichment opportunities, yeah.
yeah, so space allocation and constraints, there's a concern that maybe we have some storage issues, or, you know, we've built these two, we have these beautiful facilities, and in classrooms, we are definitely coming up short in the teacher storage or maybe student storage part, or just where we can put things in the classrooms, but also then where people can go in the building. So as you know, our staffing plan includes more adults at the elementary school in particular, and so we're running out of space in some cases for small groups or for additional classrooms. And so that is, if we're not going to do anything with our facilities at this point in terms of big projects, it feels like a weakness, right? Because there's some things that we maybe are struggling with. But then it's also in threats, because in order to do something really big about it, and, you know, in terms of like re-looking at our facilities, that's not something that we've really talked about or been interested in doing. It's not in the plan. So the team didn't feel like it could really go in weaknesses because they weren't sure that that was a big project that we would want to or need to tackle, because our population is kind of up and down. We're seeing those bubbles. But we also feel like there are some solutions that we can put in place with, like the furniture order, when we upgrade or upgrade furniture or things, fixtures that we have in the buildings, that we might be able to address more of the particular needs of the classrooms that maybe weren't addressed in the construction plan.
The thing that jumps out to me is in threats is that when I look at the other thing in the other items in threats, they seem much more significant, impactful on kids that we have very little control over.
Yes.
The space allocation, we're not gonna do another referendum, we're not gonna add it, unless.
Not in the near future,
not-
yeah,
Unless
yeah.
some huge development comes in and we get 500 kids moving in, maybe something changes, but
It did come up, like the
Not
Stonebridge
gonna happen for a
development has
while.
been on
but that's been on the radar for 15
forever,
years.
so,
Yeah.
right.
And so I kind of think that maybe it doesn't belong in threats and perhaps it belongs in weaknesses, because if there's a way to get incredibly creative, maybe we can
Consider
do
some of
something
those
better
things.
with that.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Amy, you're
actually,
taking
Mark.
notes, right? Yeah.
Can you remind me, because you said in the beginning, but I need it twice, weaknesses versus opportunities?
Yeah, so weaknesses are things that we actually try to address or have tried to address, and we're not doing that well at it. So we've like made plans or have done some initiatives to address whatever's in that box, but it doesn't seem to be going that well. We've made efforts and we're not seeing the gains. Opportunities is like, we haven't even started really, people don't feel like we've started really addressing it in a systematic way. But if we did make a plan, that's an opportunity for improvement. So there's like, I guess, a more hopeful connotation with opportunities, because weaknesses feels like something we're just not doing very well right now and
But
trying
it's still
to.
an opportunity to grow on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, both
So
of those boxes, those two boxes are really where our goal areas are gonna
Yeah.
come from.
That's what I remember. Okay, so I guess my opinion then is, I mean, we just had a policy meeting on behavior
Mm-hmm.
interventions. I would like to, I didn't see much data in the packet about falling short there. So I'm curious why that would be a weakness. It just, because there's not very, I don't know.
I think that one came more from perception data, from staff and parents. Perception data in the Thrive survey, the Human X survey, 5 Essentials came out a little bit of like management, behavior management. And if you remember on the first SWOT analysis, it was behavior management. And the team felt really uncomfortable with that wording.
Yeah.
We felt like it was more about when a student is demonstrating that they're having, they're struggling with a behavior or manifestation of some kind of something that they're struggling with in school. It's after what we've taught that there aren't maybe some additional interventions, systematic interventions that we could utilize for individual students and make a difference in those behaviors. And again, just because it's in the weakness part, that's the perception right now, which is the reality probably for some people, but maybe not for all people.
Okay.
So again, anything in these boxes are trends. They're trends based on our data, and then the team has to just kind of sift through that and see where they think it's appropriate. But again,
Amy was
this is
good.
what we're here for,
Amy,
too.
when we did the last Zoom about this, Amy was
Yeah.
asking a question
Mm-hmm.
exactly about this, and couldn't quite put her finger on the language,
yeah,
but I kind of get it.
It
given
feels
your
too
question.
personal to
Well,
see
it
it
kind of
that way.
depends on who's impacted by it,
True.
who's observed it, and it's often a small subset of the population that has really been affected directly by that. And so, you said it's also, you used the word perception, so I think you have to build your plans for improvement around not only improving the way we do interventions, but also how we
communicate.
communicate them and how we help people perceive them.
Yeah, and I think that's really, I mean, I'm not surprised to see it up there. I mean, this is why we had the behavior policy committee meeting. I mean, we've
It's an explosive
definitely,
little point
we've
anyways.
heard,
Yeah.
I mean, we've heard that people are feeling like this is a big issue, not just because of their own child, but more because of what their children are experiencing in school or in other places. We're not alone in that. And some of the threats, quite frankly, are not helping with some of those things.
Right.
But I think in terms of an area of improvement, I mean, let's be honest, if it's the perception, then that's the reality for some folks.
Yeah.
And so we need to get better, to your point, of maybe doing better and communicating better, or just maybe communicating in a different way. Because with behavior, you're right, it is personal, and there isn't a lot that we can share on individual behavior intervention.
Right.
So there's confidentiality around it, but there could be some work to look at our communication systems or what we can share.
I
That's in
like
the
your-
action planning point.
I like your point about how all of these listed in boxes are just really, but particularly weaknesses and opportunities are opportunities for goals, right? To set goals around those things. And so I understand what you're saying, Carrie. I don't think that, I think that having an opportunity to set a goal around behavior management, intervention, whatever we end up calling it, is
That makes
important.
sense. Yeah,
Is
it
cool.
makes a
Makes
lot
sense.
more
And
sense.
I almost see it as consistent behavior, like maybe it fits more in opportunities, but because to me, I mean, my perception is that it's not across the board, all grade levels that we're having these, behavior interventions, weakness of behavior interventions. So maybe it belongs more in opportunities and is a consistent behavior, it's all about being consistent across the grades.
You mean vertically? Yep, that's a good point to bring to
Yeah,
the
that
team.
is a good point.
Just as a, because maybe there are some grades that are doing have it more under control, not under control, but
I know,
you
More
know what I mean?
consistent approach.
Yeah.
or figured it out.
I mean,
that's
and the
the way
other
to
thing
grow.
that's nice about this is that if this is for a 3 to 5 year plan. So we would love in 3 or 4 years when we come back for this to be moved to a different box. And yeah, I think the more specific we can get, which I think that's a great point to bring to the team, the more specific or actionable we can create a goal that's actionable, something that we can address.
And it
So-
might even hit the enrichment portion too.
Yeah.
Because I see enrichment in my fourth grader, in her math and that type of thing, which, I think that maybe some other grades were not, it is a weakness. So
a good
again,
point.
it's that consistency.
Yeah,
that
differentiation is really built into the fourth and fifth grade a
Yeah.
lot more than the other grades.
So you're thinking consistent implementation.
Yeah, and move it more of an opportunity than a weakness.
I see that we don't mention, I see it says internal communication, but not just communication in general.
That was gonna be my point as well, is I think internal miscommunication is I don't think it is, those words are representing what that's supposed to represent.
Yeah.
I agree.
I would agree with you, and was something I was gonna bring to the team, because at my table, and I can only speak for the table that I sat at this last retreat, we pinpointed communication down to specific feedback to parents from teachers on student performance.
Yes.
So internal communication to me looks like staff
Yeah.
or administrator to staff.
Right.
And I don't think that's not what I heard from my table, and I don't think I heard it on the poster. So that was definitely something that I was gonna bring up myself.
I think Crystal brought it up too.
Yeah.
She said the same thing that
Yeah.
you did, so we
Yeah.
should probably.
But I think it applies to a lot of different things, like the example about the behavioral interventions and how we communicate
Yeah.
that.
I was really pleased, actually, that when communication, just as a broad thing, was on the weaknesses, we had a lot of people write in like, no, I think this district does a good job of communication, which is pretty great and pretty surprising, because that's typically a thing that people aren't feeling good about. But I have heard before that idea of student performance data, so that makes sense to me.
What was the other one that's in 2 boxes?
The enrichment.
Enrichment.
Enrichment and differentiation, right? And so it says enrichment opportunities under opportunities,
right.
and then it says enrichment is also a weakness.
Yeah, and I think the reason, I think I'm remembering correctly, the reason it was in the opportunities section was because of the audit next year. That there may be some things that we're gonna be putting in place that we haven't tried yet that could address some of the issues that are coming up. But enrichment, as we've been doing it so far, at this point, feels a bit like a weakness. That we've addressed it, and for whatever reason, it's not feeling the same as it has. And so we did talk, people are aware that this is coming up for an audit, and that we should be open to new opportunities to try things differently in that area.
I was surprised to see the student and staff voice and input in opportunities, because I feel like, especially in like board meetings and then in other things, we really do reach out to the kids and the staff to give us like what's going on, or, in the classroom, I feel like I know you sit and talk, and I'm not finishing my sentences, sorry. So I'm surprised it's still an opportunity. I thought there would have honestly been a strength if it was presented to me, just because we see a lot of the students here and we see a lot of the staff supporting it.
I think you can have something that's actually a strength and an opportunity, though. In times when I've gone through these experiences in other organizations, I think even something you're doing well could be an opportunity to do something better and differently and more too. So I think
Definitely, I guess I
Makes
get
sense,
worried about the scope of like the next 5 years, like how many opportunities we're going to try to have to implement strategically.
You gotta prioritize. them.
Yeah, you're not
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
I think that's a great point to bring to the team, and I would agree. Again, at my table, that discussion, the staff members at my table also felt that staff voice there were lots of opportunities for staff voice. I think sometimes it's not whether you're given the opportunity, it's who takes advantage or how consistently people take advantage of it, which that's a different problem, but I think we can bring it back for discussion to get clear on that.
What does guaranteed curriculum mean?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask.
So, okay, so guaranteed and viable curriculum, we're gonna be talking about a lot in the next few years. And that is basically the difference, we talked about this a long time ago, may not even have been with this board, but the difference between having a plan that where we know for sure that the student outcomes that we've outlined for the year in every grade and every department are guaranteed for all students, right? And viable in the amount of time that we have. So the amount of curricular time that we are devoting to certain areas, that's a good enough amount of time to do what we're saying we're gonna do. And that we're guaranteeing there are some outcomes that all students will move from grade to grade with. Eventually, we'll add the word transparent to that, guaranteed, viable, and transparent curriculum, because our parents are gonna be wanting that kind of window into what the big skills are, what some of the core resources are. And so we're currently already working on this because it's a need. It's different from implementing a program. So right now, we have, say, Bridges as a program for math. That's not really a curriculum that can be guaranteed, because within any textbook, there's about 2 years worth of material. So teachers have to make choices. There's differentiation in there, but there's also not necessarily something that's been scoped and sequenced out. We've made some things that are priorities, and that's available then to parents. So really, any program that you'll ever purchase is not going to be right for all students. It's a resource that's great, and we have tremendous resources in here. But as we're looking at the debate over the science of reading, or we're looking at how math is taught, or we're looking at how writing is taught, there isn't one program that's going to work for all students. What we need to do is take a look at what our priorities are based on what we want for students in the standards that we're accountable for, and make sure we map them out in a way that makes sense based on the amount of time that we have and the students that we have here, and make that available for all of our teachers to be working through with their professional learning communities and continue to revise. So it's a living document. It's something that should be based on standards and adjusted all the time. So it's basically the difference between going and looking at a content area every 5 years versus continually making it a review and revise and make sure that we're doing the right thing for kids.
So would that apply not only to math and reading, but like science and
All
social
areas.
studies, so that, yeah, because
All
we
areas.
don't do it in elementary every single semester.
Right, so it's all areas. The other thing that it helps with is communication, right? So that internal communication piece. If you just hand a teacher a textbook, and they're a new teacher, let's say, they might get some training on how to implement the textbook, but if there's no document kind of saying what we've decided is priority, or what things that we think are important here based on what our outcomes need to be, then that teacher is making a lot of decisions that might not be in line with the rest of the grade. And so this is also an internal communication piece, as well as an external for parents. So it's gonna take a while to build. Margaret and I have already been working on presenting kind of the end product to the board first, so you can see what it looks like in other districts when they have this available, and then talking about it backward, mapping that plan backwards to get teachers involved, writing that curriculum, and being able to continue to revise it and make it transparent for parents. That part is non-negotiable at this point. Parents are interested to know.
I think that's huge. I mean, just everything you just said, it almost branches out to so many other goals.
Yeah, I
Like,
agree.
If that's not in place, like how can you do like metrics and yeah, team building and things like that?
And
So-
some of the work has been done here. They've done some prioritizing of standards, they've done some big ideas work, they've done a couple of units that so there's been some work, but it hasn't been brought together and kind of organized. And some systems have come out recently that are really useful for that and helpful in building that blueprint. So we might as well take advantage of those tools and pull together the work that's been done over the last 5-6 years. We have new teachers that have come in that haven't been involved, so we're really working on a process for building and then continual revision, and making available for parents. And also helps with common planning. So like our student services team doesn't always have common plan time with our grade level teachers. And so it's hard for them to get together and know what they're doing and collaborate on those things. But again, if we have that available in the system, all organized, then people can know ahead of time and be able to support students better. So it hits a lot of things. And that work is starting this spring.
Great.
Or anything else in there that feels off?
Can you give some background as to the change from materials, tech and resources being a strength to just access to that? Because it almost makes, seeing that change almost makes it seem like we're not providing
It's a great question.
appropriate.
And that was a big discussion, really related to what I was just talking about. So we do have access to a lot of resources. Not everyone believes that everyone has access to the highest quality resources or the most up-to-date resources. For example, we haven't really invested in social studies resources for a long time, and we haven't updated our science resources for a long time. Not all of the tech does everyone feel like is appropriate, and there was also something about parents at home don't necessarily feel like they have the resources to support their kids at home. So we felt like access to technology is a plus here. We have a lot of it, our kids have a lot of it, and you guys did a tremendous job making that change for COVID for sure, and that will be here forever. But there are definitely some resources that we feel like we're not necessarily providing the highest quality that we could or the most aligned resources that should come under that guaranteed viable, transparent curriculum.
I guess I have one last thing for me. So bullying is very, is like very specific. And just curious where that came out, just because it's a hot topic.
Well, and the fact that it's in opportunities, which we have now decided is something we haven't really addressed but can address.
And
I
I
mean, do you
thought we
feel like bullying is something we haven't addressed
I
at
thought
all?
we
Not that there
had.
can't be improvement.
Right,
but-
no, of course, but it's so specific to like.
I might reach out to my colleagues here that are also on strategic plan. It wasn't a topic at my table, so I'm not sure where that one came from. Was it at your table?
It was from a lot of the student surveys and from the students at my table.
Or not feeling like it had really been talked about? or-
That they see it from other people happening.
Okay.
And, you know, what their perception of that is. They expressed that they felt like it was happening.
That's a really great perspective to take seriously.
I agree. And it would be nice to know, maybe if it's possible, not to single anybody out, what is more driven by the students? Because I feel like that's a large voice to listen to. That would be kind of, and I think it would be not quick fixes, but if we hear them and can do more for them, that
I
would be
think
huge.
that one, I mean, there's a few of them on here that will be tremendously helpful to have students on the action committees that are
Yeah.
working on planning for this. Yeah, like I said, our students on the team are really tremendous. And I don't think all the time talking from, like you said, personal experience.
No.
They were bringing the voices of other kids to the table, and that's really, I would agree with you. I don't think this is a district that's never done anything about bullying.
But if you hear, now, like, hearing that it's
Yeah.
actually from the kids, like, I retract what I was thinking.
Yeah,
'cause
changed
we
my
think
perspective, too.
we've completely, you know, put certain things in place, but if they're saying it, then there's,
And there might be things that kids know that are happening that we haven't addressed yet because we don't even know it's happening.
Right.
So part of it is making sure that kids feel like they're in a safe environment to tell us what's happening and then addressing those things. Yeah,
There's been initiatives, as long as I've been here,
sure.
having to do with bullying. How effective they were, I don't know. Bullying is one of the most difficult things in society to get rid of, I would imagine, so.
That's a
No,
broad
there's no
definition.
easy fix.
Yeah.
And some of it, I mean, I will say the conversation really went around how much of those threats that we don't have control over are causing some of the things that we do feel like we have a little bit more control over. But it's a vicious, right? It's like an inside-outside problem, so. You know, one thing that Crystal pointed out to us was it was pretty impressive that at all of our tables, when we looked at our data, every single table listed staff and students as a strength. And she's never seen that in the districts that she's worked with. And so I feel like with the strength of staff and students, we can address any of these issues that are coming out as weaknesses or opportunities. As long as we use our people, we're gonna be in good shape. Anything else on this part?
Can social media pressure, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
last minute thought, social
No.
media pressure and comparison, because bullying made me think of behavioral interventions, which made me look at threats from the outside and also social media pressure and comparison. So bullying is all over social media. Should we be, and I think I've mentioned this before on a meeting at some point in my career over the years, should we be providing instruction to students about how to navigate social media effectively? In terms of behavior and response to behavior.
there's part of that that's in our tech curriculum. I know our librarians talk about media literacy and information literacy. I
Is
know
that
in
an
our health,
opportunity,
in our health
perhaps?
curriculum, but I think you're right. Maybe to strengthen that in the student and staff mental health, or add that piece as an opportunity.
Yeah, opportunity perhaps.
That's part of what we're bringing Jessie back to talk about is, because social media changes. Like, generally speaking, pressure and comparison happen in that world, but how it happens
Specific vehicle,
changes so much,
Faster than you
like,
can keep up
so
with it.
fast. And so parents have a hard time even keeping, I do, like, have a hard time even keeping up.
Well, it's the same way we're preparing kids for jobs that don't even exist.
Yeah.
In 20 years. You have to educate them and prepare them to deal with social media threats, for lack of a better word, that we can't anticipate just yet, but they're gonna be coming.
And just generally speaking, media, not even social media.
Yeah, whatever
Just
that
regular
means.
media threats. Yeah.
Can I take that class?
What's that?
Can I take that class?
Yeah, right. Agreed. Stay off of it is like my own,
Yep.
but it's hard to do
Mine
that.
too.
It's hard to do that.
Yeah, and we can't control that either, right? You know.
All right, so we'll move us on to, so when we looked at our vision, right, we started looking at our vision, our mission, and each table had an idea of looking toward the future with some of the research they did on websites, other vision statements, other mission statements, and had some ideas that were put out. Again, we talked about building these portraits. The goal of the portraits is to create a framework so that we can look at everything through a lens. So adult portrait is really about who are we hiring, how are we evaluating, what are our adults doing to make sure that we get our students the place we want them to be. The system portrait is how are we organizing our systems and processes and procedures to get what we're looking for in terms of outcomes. And then, of course, we had words and phrases that we liked, that we wanted included, to build these draft statements. So we'll go back and just take a look. Remember, our portrait of a learner has already been finished. And so we're looking now for adult portraits and system portraits that will help us get to those student outcomes. You know, the process behind this was very basic. It was voting. We all voted on our top ones, and the top themes came out of the group. So is there anything on this adult portrait that you feel like shouldn't be there, or that you really feel like should be included, that you feel strongly about? The ones in bold, again, are aligned to that portrait of a learner.
So I'm gonna make a point here that may show that I'm really ignorant, but maybe somebody else had this misperception as well. In the labeling here, the adult portrait, I wasn't aware that this was just like employees. I was thinking community beyond.
So we can say that.
Well, I'm wondering if you want to be more specific
Yeah.
about what it is for.
I think I would like to have that conversation with the strategic planning committee. You know, we talk a lot about a community support system, and, you know, we're on this community wellness task force, we meet with the village all the time, like, we're always talking about what we believe in our community. And I don't know how it would be received to just say, this is what we ask of all of our adults that interact with our students.
I took it that way, because I was in Portrait of a Learner, and when we spoke about future, it was like how the learner will become an adult, how adults in the community will, like,
Interact.
yes, and so I took it like, I was thinking as a community member and also as teachers and staff.
I mean, we can decide. And I think it's actually helpful to have sort of a guideline. You know, it's difficult sometimes to have conversations with adults that interact with the system in a way that is not helpful. And so if we as a team feel like that is something that we would like to communicate, that this is what we are asking for from all of the adults, I think we can certainly do that. I think CEC typically does it as an employee portrait, because that's what we have control over, but that's something we can discuss.
You could phrase it in a way carefully that, you know, employees will embrace, I'm spitballing, but it will embrace these characteristics and role model them in all their interactions within the building and within the, you know, and to the community or before the community or something, as well as the board should probably buy into that as well.
Yeah, all of this will have to have lots of narrative around it. I mean, remember, she showed that Vision 2030 piece that's kind of like fleshes out all these things. So we can absolutely discuss what we mean by it.
It's an interesting idea, but extending it beyond just employees and stuff.
Anything in here that you feel like is not appropriate?
They're all good things.
They're all good things, yeah. Again, the system portrait is, as we're evaluating our systems, as we're evaluating how we make decisions, these would be the pieces that we would want to measure against. Are we adhering to these pieces? I think this is very reflective, I think, of my experience of what people value, so.
So can you, it's kind of along the same lines as the prior question, can you tell me in your mind what system portrait, who's that speaking to, or what is that speaking to?
So that, to me, is speaking to the administrative team and teams of teachers. So as you're making decisions about how to do things, are we meeting these criteria? So for example, if I'm looking at our multi-tiered system of supports for interventions for students, is that system that students are in by default, whenever we collect data and decide whether or not they need additional support, is that system respectful of students, families, and staff? So are we communicating with families? Are we keeping staff in the loop? Are students being judged on their data accurately and fairly? So, like, we would want to evaluate systems by that. Do we invite the community into that somehow in the process? Do we have a clear purpose and direction for our interventions and enrichment? Are we flexible? Are we adaptable? You know, all of those things are what we would want our systems, processes, and procedures to reflect. Are we doing that with faculty meetings? Are we doing that when we have problem-solving meetings? Are we doing that when we decide on professional development? Or there's lots of decisions that we make or systems that we put in place that lead ultimately to who we are as a community. And I think ultimately, if all those little systems are measured against these things, then our bigger picture should result in that.
Might want to, I'm kind of a nut about precision. It's my own personal problem. But you might want to define,
Yeah,
you know, put language to what you just said, or
I
something
agree.
that the team can agree on.
I agree. It's an interesting idea, to be honest. I've never worked with a system portrait before. I like the idea.
Yeah,
And I think it's going to take a little bit for us to integrate it into our practice, but I like it. Like, it makes sense to me as a guidepost. Okay, So then we get to our draft mission, vision, and mottos. So currently, we don't have a motto. We do have a mission and vision. The mission, remember, is the why we exist. The vision is what we're shooting for. So the vision should be something we're working for that we aren't now. And then the motto is like a quick, high-level overview of who we want to be as an organization, or what we want to put out in the world that's easy to remember. So the 3 drafts, the fact that they're in these little chunks, that doesn't have to stay. The fact that there's, they might not be worded correctly, the team can work on that. But I guess the idea behind crafting some language is just that this can get really tedious with a big team. So what I guess I would ask is, what's resonating with you that you like in any of these? And what is something that, so for example, Carrie said last time, do you mind me calling you out?
No, I was going to.
So Carrie doesn't love the word dream. So that's fine. That's good for us to know as a team that that's not something that is feeling good. So are there other things like that where it's just not, it just doesn't feel like it belongs? Or are there things that you're like, absolutely, this should be in there?
Well, I do want to make one thing that we spoke about, that I do feel like mission and vision is something that we as a board have to also deal with on a
We have to own
monthly.
it, right?
Yeah, we have to own it. And so if we're not able to get behind it, it's going to be difficult. So for the people that are going to maybe be at the next strategic planning from the board, maybe explain to the groups, like, how it affects us by what it says. I don't necessarily know what that would sound like, and I can't go, so I apologize. But I do think they need to understand from a board perspective, like, how it's drives us in our meetings, and then, because I think it's a little different than how it drives like a parent or a staff member.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, ultimately, we would love for it to be embedded everywhere, that everyone knows it and calls upon it and thinks about it. But yes, this is the board statement, right? Sorry. And all these were put in the survey. So we do have some preliminary feedback. We will have a lot of feedback. Currently, I have 217 responses so far. It's going out in teacher newsletters this week. Students are starting to take it. Teachers will take it at faculty meetings tomorrow and staff. It's going in the Village newsletter on Friday, so I'm keeping it open for an extra day or two, just in case we have 5 community members that are from my non-parent list that have already filled it out. 2 current high school students that are graduates of 65. So we're getting people to weigh in. And there are those 2 open-ended questions that you can, talk about what's working and what's not working. So for these, is there anything that you really want us to take back to the team, myself and the 2 people that are gonna come?
The one thing I like moving our current vision, excellence in education, enthusiasm of life for every student every day, keeping that as a motto. I think that I'm just using feedback from the Community Wellness Task Force meeting that I know some of us were at, and the word excellence I know can be a debatable word to use, given that it can cause, from a psychologist perspective, it can cause stress and anxiety, knowing that excellence is the only, alternative.
I can tell you that's in the feedback already on the survey.
Yeah. So other than that, I've always liked that motto. I've always liked that generally, but I like the vision. I'm not a big fan of a vision having the word build, because build is not really vision. Build is more like what you do every day to try to get somewhere else. So I think the vision is more about just working to build. That's more of an action. I do like, as I've thought about these, I like this one that's, we envision an inclusive community that empowers all students to foster their dreams, explore their interests, and create their futures. I like that as long as that motto, some version of that motto stays the same, because I think really that's what we ultimately want, right? So I don't know that I love the mission that was tied to that one, but I do like that vision statement on its own.
On the vision statement, and sorry if this has already come up, I really liked the personalized learning experience, because I think that's important. And that Where did I see it? I like the word, right there, engaged also. Because I think that word is strong for everyone being part of it.
And all three of the ones had inclusive, which is great. You know, all three of the ones that were at least proposed here. Clearly a word that came up in lots of the tables.
I do like as well, the idea of personalized learning experiences. Another one says ownership of the learning. There's a word that I always see that's in one of them, agency. For some reason.
I don't like that word.
I struggle with that word for some reason, maybe because I'm too old and it wasn't used the way it is now, 10 or 15 years ago. And so, I don't know, I wonder if it's.
Can you say more about that? Because that did come up in the survey
Like, I wonder if
also.
that word will be used in 10 years from now or 20 years from now. I don't know. I understand how it's used. It doesn't flow from me in my conversations, although I think I understand how it can be appropriate, but
No, I think that's come up as
it's
not,
just not a word I'm comfortable with for
and
some
not,
reason.
something that's not resonating with people, so, yeah.
Well, the way it's used here is redundant, agency and ownership.
Yes,
It's a little bit
yep,
redundant.
that too.
I wish learning would be in our vision, not the last one, or included in the last one, because I think that's kind of the end game, right? That's what we do.
And we do have the feedback of kindness somewhere in here, right, Mark?
Well, I mentioned it last time. I don't know if I saw it specifically. But maybe we just don't want to be kind.
Well, there's another section, because there's core values, so there's another opportunity to add kindness, but is there anything else in mission and vision? I would say I'm not, there's definitely a group in the community that feel comfortable with our current mission and vision, which is good to know. They can support it. I don't personally believe that our current vision is a vision in the sense of something that we are working actively to create. So I do like, if we're gonna keep that wording, to move it to a motto, because I think it's very easy to understand, it makes sense, it feels good to a lot of people, but like vision-wise, I think we need something a little more
I
specific.
like our current vision as a motto.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
totally.
I agree with that.
Yeah, but in a great way, a majority of people that have filled out the survey so far feel like they could support our current mission and vision, which is good to know.
And I like Carrie's thought about, you know, we want a vision that, you know, talks about inclusivity, that talks about, I love creating their futures, because that's what agency essentially means, I think, right? But adding in learning, you know, somewhere, I think does make a lot of, teaching or learning, or, you know, something like that, I think.
Lifelong learner.
I like the word commit. I mean, there's something about that word that makes, it feels really strong to me, so I just wanted to put that out there. I like that idea of we're here to commit to all these things.
And a mission type area, right? Not so much. a
Yeah,
vision,
and the
but a
mission,
Yeah.
yeah.
I feel like it would, we speak of our mission and vision every time we talk about it a lot. I know a lot of people in the workforce have missions and visions, but, for others, if we want it to be something that everybody gets behind, like very clear explanations of what it means and to who it means it to, you know? I do think like if the kids read that, they wouldn't know, but like the teachers would get it and we would get it, but maybe some community members would say, what's the difference, or?
Good point. Yeah, building that out is gonna be huge.
Can you say more? And I think Crystal did talk about this, and I'm just not remembering. I understand how the tables assigned kind of the verbs, nouns, and adjectives around the mission and vision, but can you say more about how these three examples were articulated and formed?
So, we looked at other vision and missions, we read some research around current, trends in education.
The
and
whole
then-
group?
Yeah.
Or- okay.
Well, we jigsawed it, so each table had, I think, 3 resources, 6. There were 4 articles and 3 websites, and we jigsawed some of it, and then some of it we all read. So, yeah, it was
I guess-
sort of, remember in the portrait when we
Yeah.
talked, like the landscape and looked
Yeah.
at current things, and then talked about, we also looked at our current vision and mission, we also looked at the perception data and the things that we had strengths, and, yeah.
So I guess the reason I'm asking is with 5 tables, but 3 ultimate examples of mission vision? Were there other ones that just weren't included here, or
No,
did the
Crystal
5 tables
drafted
come
these.
together? Okay, so
Crystal drafted these
that was my
based on
question.
our,
Yeah.
yep.
Okay, got
So
it.
she committed to trying to pull everything together to give us a start. And then the team hasn't even had a chance to look at them or try to wordsmith or change or what have you, so.
That makes sense.
These
Okay.
are just there to seed conversation,
Yeah.
really, right?
The
Yeah.
ideas, right.
That
I
makes
will
sense.
say that, and this is really not a helpful comment, I will acknowledge that. None of these resonate as it to me, right? So I am happy to hear that this is just sort of a jumping off point for the committee to start to wordsmith it. And I fully understand why you can't wordsmith it with a whole bunch of people.
Yeah.
You know?
It's hard. I mean, as it is, there's a big commitment to this work and a lot of hours that's been spent. But I've sat in meetings where you try to wordsmith and it can be painful.
Oh, yeah.
I think what I'm hearing, though, is that we like the current vision as the motto. We've gotten used to that. It makes sense. It incorporates some things. You like commit. I think we like commit. We like inclusivity. We like learning. We like some, not
Ownership
the
of
word,
their
but some
own
ownership,
Engaged.
agency, creativity over your own
Personalized
futures.
learning, I'm
Yeah.
hearing. Yeah.
So at least we're getting some
Oh,
themes I
yeah.
think we're comfortable with.
Kindness is in there. Of course, we still have core values to get to, so it could be there too.
One of
But
the
yeah,
things, one of the things I would suggest too on the visions, go big or go home. These aren't big enough.
Yeah.
I think we can dream bigger.
Yeah.
It's your vision. You know, you're looking 5, 10 years down the road. This is a community with amazing support and resources. We can go better.
I think that's a really good thought, because if the definition of vision, which as I understand it, is something that you're ultimately not going to attain, you're going to always be working towards, we can attain an inclusive community that empowers all students to foster their dreams, explore, not the word dreams, but
Oh, no,
explore their
let's
interest,
just,
creative,
let's
like,
do it twice. We dream, everybody dreaming, I'm joking.
but I do agree where I think that what I'm seeing here is attainable, you know, what happens if you attain it, you know, so it's, I think you're right, Mark.
But you want to make
Go
it
a little
hard.
bigger,
I think,
yeah.
You know, but also big, bold, you know.
Because I don't think
Notice
what
I'm saying that at my last meeting.
And
In alternate meeting.
it's like, why are you aligning with the high school and why aren't you? Yeah, no, I'm just kidding.
Well, I don't think we're far away from having an inclusive community. I
Yeah.
don't think we're far away from empowering all students. I don't think we're far away from, you know, having an education or a system that helps students to create their future. So I think incorporating that is great, but we do a lot of those things already because we have great staff and great administrators. So,
Is there anything that you're thinking of when you think of that unattainable?
See, for me, it was excellence. I didn't realize that had a
it's
negative connotation.
kind of a new thing, yeah.
Yeah, because like no one's ever, or perfection or something like that. You just don't achieve it, so. But you gotta strive. Towards something.
Striving for perfection.
Okay, no, I gotta go. to
I heard some feedback on there, but no trying language. We don't want to try. We want to do it.
Agree with
Yeah.
that, totally. Trying, building, that sort of.
Yeah, because we're committed.
Yeah, we're committed. So I would encourage you to think about too, like, because we're coming up next week, so it doesn't have to be today, but if there are things that you're like, wow, that would be a stretch.
Well, I think that is a good question. What is that big thing? What is that big thing that's, you know, seems like something we could always be working towards? I don't know. Think about it.
One of the things I keep coming back to that I've heard about since before I was on the board and my kids had IEPs and working with teachers, and so many kids require or really would thrive with a unique curriculum per kid, which is like virtually unachievable. you know,
Right.
But how do you do that? How do you teach to that?
That's your personalized
But that's.
learning piece.
Right, I think that's a huge piece that I don't think you're ever gonna, especially in the public sector, when we have to teach to the bell curve probably, I suppose. But you can dream toward it perhaps.
I think that's been talked about a lot, and I think there's ways to build that. I mean, I would agree with you that truly personalized learning experiences are a thing that would be very hard to
But you
attain
can move
at
in
all
that
times for
direction,
all
right?
kids. So that does feel like a reach. The other thing that feels like a reach, which, I mean, I think I would love to see is maybe a little different than the agency and ownership piece, but a partnership between between teachers and students to co-create that personalized learning experience.
I don't think we should be bound by what other districts and what the
Yeah.
trends are either. It's like what's right for our kids in our town and at that, now and in 5 or 10 years.
And I agree with the idea of setting out, something that's really, you really have to, that you may never achieve, right? But also, I don't wanna look at the vision and be like, oh, that's not doable. What, like, what,
We gotta own it, right? Yeah.
But if you can, something that's out there that you're gonna start laying groundwork and building foundations and heading in that direction, that,
Yeah,
Something that's still motivating.
yeah,
that is the
Yeah,
end goal.
needs that motivating piece, right, yeah.
you don't want it to be ridiculous.
Right.
Where people are gonna laugh at it and say,
Well, and I'm
we want all
hoping,
our
I
kids
don't
to be
think that's
NASA
what you're
astronauts.
suggesting.
is our vision.
I'm hoping we can sneak hopeful, optimistic, and joyful in here too somewhere. Because I think we're missing that piece sometimes.
And kind.
I like that. Yeah.
We got time. I'm just kidding.
Shall
Could
we
you
move on
imagine
to
if
our
I was
core
sober?
values?
Like, I'm so, like, I got it. No, I'm just kidding. Yes, kindness. Absolutely. I think we can strive for that, to create an environment that's kind and hopeful and joyful and
I like hopeful and joyful.
Yeah, I think it's
Well,
how,
and all those things support learning.
yeah, but I think it's how you use those words, because putting hopeful
Sounds
in
a
the
little
beginning of
dreamy.
the sentence is a little loosey-goosey, but you put it at the
I
end.
hear you.
You're
We
hoping that
are
we can do
hopeful,
that?
right,
We hope to
so,
create.
We're creating a
an
sense of
environment,
hope.
yeah,
Right.
well, it's
Or
just gotta,
optimism.
even
Opium
though
is not a strategy, wasn't that a derogatory
I feel like
expression?
those words can go out there, but those are the words that like you walk away from. And that, those are the ones you remember, so if you put it in the wrong
Place.
inflection on the
Yeah.
syllable or whatever they call it, it can change your mindset.
I agree.
That's the only thing I was worried about with Dream, but like, put it in there, I'll quit, I'm kidding.
Oh, my God. That wasn't kind.
Well, I look
I like
forward
it.
to seeing what the
Yeah.
feedback is.
No, this is
from
great
the-
feedback, great feedback. Then the last piece is core values. Like, as an organization, what are the values that we build all of these things on?
I think we should add kind in there.
I think kindness might belong in here too, I think.
I'm laughing, but I am serious about it.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah,
I say table one had more bullet points than any of the other tables, for whatever that's worth.
well, that table was
Really.
gifted. I'm just kidding. I don't remember
I don't know
whose
who was
table
there,
that was.
but they had a lot of ideas,
I
which is
don't
good.
remember whose table that was. I don't think it was mine.
I
though.
worry about excluding things and they're no longer a focus. Specifically, one that we've had in the past that's been a big part of my board work is the whole fiscal responsibility thing. That people lose that or forget about that because that got us into trouble once upon a time.
I mean, that is, right, in a great way, you did a great job in your last plan to address that. And so there was nobody, I don't think, in any of the groups that felt uncomfortable with our position financially and with facilities. And yeah, it's strength.
It looks like it's in 3 or 4 of these core values too, right?
So I think we can bring that to the table as a core value as well, being responsible stewards of the community's resources.
No, that's a core value, I agree, yeah.
Yeah.
So the core value ideas here in the bottom right box are these
Those are sort of the draft set.
based off?
Based
the-
off of
okay, got it.
everything that.
Yeah.
And it not, just because something's on the chart doesn't necessarily mean it was a trend, but there are some things on here that are on more than one chart that we can certainly move over. Anything else that you feel like we need to move over?
I love the resilience. I always go towards the resilience.
I love accountability, but it didn't get moved over.
Accountability,
Yeah.
okay.
I don't think we're moving towards a generation that can own it.
Well, I think some of this also depends on where it's settled for mission and vision too, because the core values have to speak to that. So if a core vision we have is creativity, where someone's creating their own future, then a core value should be in line with that too. So I think,
The other piece is she was very clear, she doesn't want us to be redundant. So if something is in there one place, we don't want it in there 4 places. We want to use those spots to kind of build off each other and scaffold.
sure, okay.
Is this comparable to in the last one where we have like belief statements? Is that kind of? like,
Yes, this is the
Where that comes from, or
guiding
someone-
principles, which we had a lot of verbiage around those.
Yeah.
There was a lot in there, which we can build out again.
Are our core values, this is kind of a funny question, but I do mean it. Are our core values things that we want, like we have our pause and what do we have at the middle school, Nate?
Bluffer.
Bluffer
basics.
traits. Are all of those are?
I mean,
our core
part of what we'll
values,
have to do is like,
basically?
where does this fit in? Because all of it should be embedded into everything we do.
Yep.
So if that's the place, like it gets transferred into Bluff Retreats and Pause, like, that might be a place where we say we wanna embed some of those pieces.
I'm also, this is personally, I'm a big believer in having a lot of core values. You don't need to be set on 5 or 6. I mean, LEAD has 37 core values, so I mean, we just add to them as you, and we do look at those, and that's just one example, but I mean, I think there's a lot of great things on the list, but paring it down to 5 or 6, I don't think is necessary. So that just a little bit of feedback there in terms of, as long as they're things that we are going to use in decision-making and supporting students and supporting staff and supporting our system, I think they should all be on the list. But if there are things that are on the list just to be on the list, then they probably shouldn't. But I think having a wide list of those is okay. That's my own personal.
Yeah, I don't know if I think we need 37, but I do agree that there's a lot on here that I could see being on.
So feeling like a more inclusive, like a larger list could encompass more of the feedback, yeah.
You know, like, kind of along the same lines as my comment about financial responsibility, or whatever the exact wording was, fiscal discipline, the transparency point, I only see that in one of my things, but that was one that, when we worked really hard to make that part of everything the board and the administration did over the past number of years, and so
I think it's a big part of the success
I hate
too.
to
Yeah.
lose sight of that.
I agree, and I think that's a danger, right, and
You don't have
being
somebody remind-
successful at something, which I think is a great point when we talk about strengths. Like, part of Crystal's whole thing about strengths is, just because it's a strength doesn't mean you don't want it somewhere in the plan, because you don't want to lose it.
Right.
So I totally agree with that. Yeah, I agree.
I feel collaboration is something important that in the schools, within the community, everyone working together.
I agree.
There is some, so that made me think of partnership too, that's always
There's
an
in there
area.
too, it's in there too.
Table 5, I see it, but I don't know.
Mark, should kindness be a core value?
I'm glad you're getting it as much as me.
I think dreaming should be. Let's dream about kindness.
Right.
I don't know why I'm so cold-hearted.
I mean, I think that's good direction for the team, that we could be more inclusive. And I mean, believe me, the process is coming from the process that has worked in other places, but if we feel like we want more of those core values, we can do whatever we want with this plan.
I've never seen any research on paring down core values, creating better outcomes, you know. I get wanting to keep it simple, but
I think some of it is around that idea of like, when you prioritize everything, then less becomes prioritized. I think that's where it's coming from, but
I'd be curious on Crystal's depth, because my understanding of core values are that they're not the highest, but
Right.
I mean, they're
they're the
values,
foundation.
they're foundation of things you use
Yeah.
to,
I would agree.
like the high.
They're not your goals. You're not
Right,
setting your goals
exactly.
around that. That's the foundation of everything you do. Yeah, I would agree.
But this has been, I mean, for me, this has been a great opportunity for us to connect and talk, and
I agree, thank you.
so I appreciate that.
No, this is super helpful.
I mean,
And
it's seen all the amount of work that's been put
Yeah.
into this, and all the people that,
In their time.
you know, volunteered to do it is amazing.
Well, like we said, I think this was a great opportunity for us, and I would love for 2 members, or potentially 4, or, I mean, we could do up to 6 as long as you're not in more than 2, groups of more than 2. But if you want to be involved in that retreat on the 17th, let me know. We could do 2 shifts of 2, so like somebody could come, 2 people could come 12 to 3, or 1 person go 12 to 7, and then 2 more people can go morning and afternoon shifts. I would love for you guys to see the group and see the process and be there for kind of this last piece of how do we want to like create this final future preferred future statements. So just let me know. We're ordering lunch, dinner. Panera is the choice, and we're going all out, right, Jay? It's Panera time. Because the kids have chosen, so Amy did a great job ordering, yes, pizza the first time. The kids chose Naf Naf Grill the last time, which we were amazed by the whole team. It was awesome. And then they were like, okay, now it's Panera time, our last time. So if you let us know, we will send you an order for dinner. It's at the Gorton Center. And then we, the team, will have one more meeting after that, because when we draft that final draft, that will then go out as a final thing for community feedback. And then The team will meet again to review that final feedback, create the final piece that we're bringing to the board, and then that will be the last.
Will we have another one of these?
Yeah, after our third retreat, to go over what the final product was. That'll be at the special board meeting. And then that one, we'll just create it, we'll pare down that